Before we get started, does anyone want to make public comments?
Okay. Did you buy any puzzles? Did you buy any puzzles?
I started one and I need to buy a bigger table, which means I need to buy a bigger house, which means I need to check my credit. Too many things.
I caught an ad on like Instagram of like one of these puzzle shops that was doing like a clearance sale of like a whole bunch of puzzles for like $5 each.
Oh,
I mean,
nice.
And so instantly it was like, Connie, clearance on puzzles.
But if they do it again next year, they'll get.
Oh, yeah.
I actually got myself 2 puzzles for Christmas.
You need to get one of the
Very exciting.
puzzle trays with the pieces that, and you need to get a belt lined one game because you can set it up and the pieces stay on it. Yeah, my mom got the nice one. I was having puzzle board.
I got one and it looked easy. Yeah, that was. These are just one of my favorite things in the whole world.
Save it for public comment.
I have a public comment.
Okay.
Steve did a national park puzzle. You just scrolled right past that little comment. You haven't even told us. I haven't looked over.
I picked up a one of my
Okay.
puzzles, the Ravensburger crypt, and it's the pastel one. The pastel, I love it.
All right, it's now 6 o'clock, so I call the meeting of the electoral board to order. And first item of business, I guess we have several public comments. Frank Busby, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, everybody. I'll start off with to say Happy New Year to everyone. Again, congratulations on a successful election. Just a couple of lists that we would like to get with our election integrity committee. One would be the digital list of the provisional ballot law, if there is one.
Yeah, I have to see what's available for release.
Okay, I understand it would be redacted.
Yeah, previous guidance only allowed for release of the provisional ballot log during the provisional ballot meeting.
Oh,
So,
we had a representative at that meeting and said he didn't get one.
because it was only available during the meeting, like while the meeting was taking place. So,
Oh, well, he was, well, maybe he didn't see it, John. He said he didn't see it. Anyway, if it was possible to get that, we'd appreciate it. Also, if there was a list of same-day registration voters who were notified by your office, I'm assuming maybe around Christmas, maybe something went out to notify voters who did same-day registration that their vote was counted and that there was nothing like that? Oh,
We don't have to notify people whose votes were counted. We have to notify people whose votes were not.
oh, okay, okay. And then a third list, if it was available, would be a list of individuals with undeliverable mail-in ballots. So for all the undeliverable mail-in ballots, if there was a list of those individuals.
once again, I'll have to review code sections regarding what's released.
Okay, okay. Yeah.
I don't know what exists in our database, what we have access to, what you have to go to the state to. So.
Okay.
There's like 3 laws that I have to review. I mean, it's not asking for public information is not always a straightforward request. So,
Okay, maybe I'll follow up with an email too.
yeah.
For that one, it's my understanding that if the mail-in ballot was returned undeliverable, that they should be taken off the permanent absentee ballot list. Is that correct?
I without the code section.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to say either yay or nay.
I'll
Yeah.
off the top of my head, Gretchen is more reserved than I. I believe if their ballot came back as undeliverable, they become inactive, and when you become inactive, you are removed from the list. I think that's just like a natural function of the system.
It's not automatic, no.
Okay.
No.
So inactive voters wouldn't have a ballot sent out, but they wouldn't be removed from.
We have to physically go in and remove inactive voters from the permanent absentee ballot list.
It's not automatic.
some pieces of that, once again, without going
Yes, yes.
during test, I don't want to say what is, but I do know that before sending out mail ballots, we go through and remove an inactive status, or we go through and remove all the voters who are inactive from the PAB list.
Okay.
So,
That's what
but you do that before an election, not necessarily
after.
after, because voters who are inactive still have legal rights. So, yeah.
And the last point was, there was some concern in other areas of Virginia that first-time voters who were registering by mail were allowed to use an expired Virginia driver's license as a form of photo ID, which apparently is not acceptable by HAVA requirements, even though it's acceptable for Virginia in-person registration. So I just wanted to make sure that the office was respecting that. That had been brought up as an issue in some other parts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, do you have a comment?
Yes, I find these post-election reports very useful, and I suggest that everybody read them thoroughly. They have.
Anybody else either here or online have a comment? All right, then we can start our regular business. First order of business is reorganizing the board for the new calendar year. And we have to elect people to each of the three positions. So I'll start off. I'm going to move that Dominic Shariffa be named as chairman, that Richard Samp, myself, be named as vice chairman, and that Kim Phillip be named as secretary.
Second,
Is there any discussion?
feel very embarrassed to wait. It's so weird to wait.
I mean, I'm sitting here furiously writing, so. Second, I mean, it's, when it's only 3 members, it's,
Unanimously.
Shall we make the same? My caveat from last year is our terms will expire and our new positions take effect at the conclusion of this meeting, or would you like to switch chairs?
I'm happy to sit right here.
Okay.
All right, if that's the end of discussion, all in favor of that proposed slate, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, but it's approved.
This way we also don't have to send Tanya running to go read them.
All right, the next order of business is to adopt minutes from our many prior meetings that were held in November. One was
That's the canvas. All the canvas stuff, the 5th, the 6th, the 9th, the 10th.
okay, so one set of minutes is the 5th, 6th, then the 9th, and then the 12th and the 13th. One is from the 13th, one is from the 15th, and one is from the 14th. And we have circulated these minutes earlier. And I had a chance to read them, and I know Dominic made
Yes.
some comments on Kim's excellent authorship. And
I will move that we approve the minutes from the canvas and the immediate post-canvas period on block.
all right, I second that motion. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye as well, so those are approved. So, all right, the next item of business is the post-election report.
So as alluded to earlier, we have released our post-election report from the November 5th, 2024 election. It should be available on our website. So last year we did conduct 3 elections. So it was quite a busy election calendar for us. We were voting for, I believe, 9 months, or in 9 months last year. So that is, yeah, a lot of time to vote. So what we like to do at the end of every year is look at how are people registering to vote in Arlington. And as is consistent with other year, almost every 62% of voters in Arlington are registering through the DMV. and another 23% are registering online. So what this means is 85% of voters in Arlington are registering through the DMV, which means they've had to enter their full social security number and it's had to match against the records that the DMV has. So it does add that added layer of protection, because when you go through the DMV, you are submitting some of those documentations like passports, birth certificates and things like that. So 85% of voters in Arlington have had their registration pass through the DMV for verification. And it's not to say that the other 15% aren't also going through the DMV at some point, but yeah. So turnout for the presidential election was similar to the previous presidential election, a little bit lower. But turnout was almost exactly the same. I think we were only off by around 500 voters. Majority of voters chose to vote early this election, with 44% voting early, and 40% voting on election day, and another 16% by mail. So I do think the numbers will probably hold. So this gives us a little bit, because we've now done a full 4-year cycle with no excuse early voting. So we now can better predict where our voters in Arlington might be choosing to vote moving forward.
Let me just comment here. I thought that the decision to have the early voting at Long Branch was an excellent one, and that was a very highly used. Very much helped to take care of.
Yeah. Yeah, so as you can see, we added Longbridge Aquatic and Fitness Center this time as an early voting site. And that was open the full time in addition to our location here at Courthouse. And then the last 2 weeks we added it was 2.5 weeks. We added Walter Reed and Madison. And I would say the satellites were pretty busy that first hour. They were open every single day. So even though you could go to Longbridge and vote without a line for almost 45 days, people were still waiting till Walter Reed opened, and going there to vote and waiting in line there. But at least voters had options. Yep.
On that, in terms of Longbridge, do you happen to know offhand how that breaks down in terms of how many of those 9,000 people were from those few weeks
Yeah.
before we had that, well, when it was just here and
Yeah. So I don't have that. We don't have that visual available, but we can certainly. I do want to release more data on early voting because we were able to get a little bit more nuanced data.
Okay.
On also like which precincts are going to which early voting locations, and then which early voting locations are busier, which hour is busier at each early voting location. We have the ability to run those visuals. We just have not. I have not sat and run it through all of them.
I just asked.
Anyways,
Yeah.
So what we consistently see, and if you followed our data dashboard, like at moving through the election, we definitely saw a surge. Like every day closer to the election we had more voters than the previous day that last week. So even though voters had the full 45 days to vote, there were definitely more coming that last week. They waited till the last week to vote in that election.
It was more of a question of like, how much.
Like 50.
I mean, you can't say with certainty that somebody who voted the 6th day of early voting at Longbridge, if there wasn't Longbridge, would have come here and wouldn't have waited.
Yeah.
But like, what was the diversion of people from this location, and like how much busier would we have been here?
Yeah.
If we hadn't had the full 45 days at Longbridge.
Yeah.
That was just sort of what I was thinking.
I do. It's
Because
one of
nearly
those.
30,000 is a lot of people to process through this building, even
The
if.
process through this room.
Yeah.
Like this is the room where those 30,000 people marked their ballots. And that's why we have the other sites open, is because this is the space we've been given for early voting. Here at Courthouse, we have to do early voting at our office. And there aren't many options in this building. And so, yeah.
In terms of space, I thought that the space at Madison was inadequate.
Yeah, it's too small, especially for the
The
Saturday.
lines were that long, but there were so many people in the room at one
Yeah.
time that it made it very difficult to move around. There is a very nice multi-purpose room there. I gather that yoga classes get first preference.
It's the
Maybe
dance classes.
for the future, that we could say that for that 3-week period or whatever it is, that the voters ought to get priority, at least in a presidential election year when there's going to be that many people
Yeah.
there.
Does present, the problem is, it presents loss of revenue for the first department anytime they have to cancel class. So it's and for us to move equipment, it takes a lot of personnel. So it's the balance, but, you know. There any other, so the other thing that I wanted to highlight, with the election this year was, some of our outreach efforts. So this was the first election, where we sent a voter guide to every voter. So anybody who's registered by August 15th was mailed an election day guide, letting them know their options to vote this election. We did not hear, everything we heard about the voter guide was positive. A lot of voters came with it in hand, far more than I thought. So when they came to vote early, they definitely had their guide with them, and they saved it throughout that election period on their fridge, which is definitely what we wanted to see. And we did not hear a single, or at least I'm not aware of a single negative comment about the voter guide. So, and I'm going to call that a win, because it's very rare that we do something, especially the first time out of the gate, and we don't receive some thoughtful ways to improve it moving forward. We also worked with the the communication and public engagement team under the county manager to produce videos about the election security, ranked choice voting, what to expect when you go to the polls. And these were run throughout the county from September to November. And then we did a number of in-person outreach with the Parks Department, and at retirement communities and universities that requested us to appear throughout the fall.
I just wanted to say that I really like that photo guide. So when I got it in the mail, I was actually, oh, this is really nice. And I even heard feedback from my parents who even were excited to see it, and they actually did use it. So.
Peter, question, the 203 ballots from election day, that's all the drop boxes? Like
That's not. Oh, that's, the Dropbox. That's Dropbox.
that number, yeah, so that's all, like, all 54 plus the 9 permanent.
I think it's just.
No, that's just the 24.
Those are just the 20, okay, that was the question, is this just the 24-hour boxes, or is this?
No, it's just the 24-hour drop boxes, because the ballots received on election day. There were 522 ballots returned to polling locations on election day. That's on page 6.
All these numbers.
Yeah, it is a lot of numbers.
All right, the cold has frozen my brain.
Mhm.
Does this also include the ones dropped off at the early voting locations?
No, those are specific, that's specifically 24-hour drop box.
The actual physical.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. So 662 ballots were returned at early voting sites. Frank, to answer your question, that number is also on page 6. So those are people who came into an early voting site. And
I appreciated your write-up here on provisional ballots. We had almost 5,000 and close to 4,500 for same-day registrations. And I guess that does bring up one concern I have, which is that an awful lot of people, once they discover that they can register to vote at the polling place, it gets to be the fall, why bother to do it any other way? And the problem with that is that there are so many ways that they can mess up. And that's why we had we had 200 votes not counted, including, I think, in some precincts, perhaps people didn't get very good guidance as to what needed to be on the form. But all of those problems, I think, could be not eliminated, but at least reduced if we made perhaps more of an effort in the future to encourage people to register to vote in advance of the election and not wait till election day, and therefore that potential problem.
On the registration before election day, my understanding from the VIBA legislative folks is that this is a VRAV drive more than ours, but we're tagging along on board. A bill passed subcommittee on the House of Delegate side from Privileges and Elections to shift the close of books from 21 days out to 10 days out. So there'll be more time to register before books close before an election. My understanding is, I guess that's a VRAV priority that we're like, yeah, sure. I wasn't sure if you had heard from, I don't know what VRAV was distributing in terms of information about that, but.
The VRAV Legislative Committee is not always forthcoming with
We happened to have a meeting last night.
legislative priorities
For the VRAV.
are. There are communication challenges.
Yes, so that's and it passed unanimously, so we're thinking maybe
Out of the already?
out of the subcommittee of P&E,
Okay,
not the full committee, but it did pass unanimously out of the
like
subcommittee.
Richmond has water again? Wait.
So the idea from the Viva lobbyists were that bodes well for it moving along and having bipartisan support and getting through so that
Yeah.
we will have more time for people to come and register beforehand. There's also a bill, this might be interesting to you, that as part of many provisions, has a provision that would force the DMV to give us more information about the transaction behind a person that either signals they are not a citizen or doesn't answer the question at all.
And that
So
would-
that we can better track who those people are and contact them as we are required to do. And
Being able to get like an up-to-date address would be very nice.
it
Yeah.
does require specifically name, social security number, driver's license number, basically any info, like all of the nice identifying information they would have that we don't get at the moment would require them to give it to us along with that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The DMV, currently, like if you've been to the DMV, if you answer the question, are you a citizen? No. In terms of for their purposes of what they give us, that's the end of the transaction to them. And all they send us is basically this person either signaled they are
Sunday,
not,
a
or-
citizen.
yeah. yeah.
And they don't, but the
We
problem
get
is
nothing.
they don't, if that person is at the DMV to update their address, we don't get the updated address. So then we're sending a citizenship confirmation letter to the wrong address when the DMV has a better address on file. Does that make sense? And they never get the letter and then they get removed for not being a citizen.
Interesting.
And then they come in on election day and go, what?
Now, my understanding is that the lawsuit that was brought by the League of Women Voters against the state continues, the one that went to the Supreme Court, and they denied the preliminary injunction, but the lawsuit continues, and that involved the state removing names for state elect.
The question to the state is the removal of people who indicate that they are not a citizen at the DMV systematic and in violation of,
It would be a violation if it is systematic and it's
Yeah.
within a certain number of days of the election. And one of the things that I think I mentioned to you as a follow-up, it would be, I mean, I gather there were like 1,600 such people who moved in those final days. And so I'm just extrapolating from that maybe 50 of them were Arlington, just based on our population share within the state. So if there is some way to figure out the 50 names that we were given to remove, and then we of course would have sent follow-up letters, how many of those people then wrote back and said, assuming we had the right address, and wrote back and said, in fact, I really am a citizen, or how many, if any, showed up at the polls and said, why was I removed? I'm a citizen, please allow me to vote provisionally. And I would say the more people who did follow up, then the greater potential error there is on the part of DMV. So if out of those 50, if a lot objected, that would be concerning. If not a lot objected, that would be less concerning. And given that the subject of the lawsuit, it would be probably nice to get that information.
I know Rich is aware, so is Kim, that we did have someone come in the public
The
meeting
provisional ballot meeting.
who was one of those people, and
He
their
wasn't
interaction.
one of the 50, but he was
No,
from an earlier time.
yeah, he was, but he was one of these people who was changing an address with the DMV. And so we sent the letters saying, hey, we have information that you're not a citizen, please. If you are, please fill out this affirmation and return it to us. But we were sending it to the address we had on file, which was no longer his address. So it would come back like, or just.
Yeah, and the most disconcerting part about that story was that he had gone to the DMV and he had pushed the button saying, I am a citizen, and it caused the
Yeah.
machine to malfunction. And the person at DMV said, oh, if you don't want it to malfunction, say that you're a non-citizen and then everything will work just fine. And so he did
Yeah,
that.
or they'll say things like you have to answer no to all the questions on the screen in order for the transaction to go through. Because each transaction at the DMV gets processed separately. So if you're doing like registering a car, updating, registering multiple cars.
So they, DMV staff is actually advising.
According, if this, once again, this is one anecdotal story. Yeah. And he was advised to say, no, he was not a US citizen in order for that transaction to go through.
That even not if you have somebody who says like, oh, just answer no to everything. There are a lot of people who go to the DMV who are
I
like,
have
okay,
an
fine.
anecdotal story from somebody who went to the DMV who was told answer.
That doesn't surprise me entirely, having been to the DMV, that
Yeah.
they're like, oh, you don't have to worry about any of that. The effective equivalent of a double negative sentence, and you're like, wait, is it yet?
These are, but like I said, this is without
You don't have corroboration.
yeah, without a study of the DMV and all of these. So to answer your question, Rich, about there isn't really a report we can run on people removed and then follow up with. So getting that, because sometimes it's like you're given a transaction to process, you process it unless you're keeping a log of that transaction separately. So, and we definitely did not have 50 to reinstate. I don't remember how many we had. We had a few, but it was less than 10. So
I have maybe this is the same question. For various purposes, if we remove somebody and then they come in on election day and they fill out a provisional ballot, the same day registration, provisional ballot, and we then process that, does a new record get created or does the system find their old?
it depends. If they've been entered into the non-citizen prohibited voter list, then it will show when you go to process that, saying that person's on the non-citizen prohibited voter list. Because it does that with felony convictions and things like that. And assuming we have the right social and everything, it will match against a record. But if that person's canceled, it's not gonna match against a canceled record. It only matches against like active and people off the list.
So it's not like as you said, like this is a relation to your statement if there's no report, like we can't even go and say, oh, we know these are the people who were canceled for this non-citizen issue, and you'd see that they then came back onto, like, you'd
Well,
have to
and
then,
each one individually.
you'd then have to, yeah, so like, that's what I mean, is like, you can't run a report of those, say, 100 people that were
Yeah.
moved and say, oh, look, here are 50 of them that have now re-registered.
Yeah, because it might not be the same voter ID number.
Okay, that was
Especially,
the question.
especially if they've moved.
It
between lo-
creates, in effect, it creates a
Yeah.
new record in Veris. They
Yeah,
have a new number.
especially if they've moved between localities,
Right.
there's no owners on a locality to match against canceled records.
Okay.
So if later on they become a SNF, that could be meshed against that canceled list.
It's a prohibited voter list in the system, but yeah, if at any point they indicate at the DMV that they are not a citizen, then they will remain on that non-citizen voter list. But as you've noted, citizenship is not a status, it is a status that changes over time. And so if they've affirmed that they are a US citizen and we have a transaction where they are affirming they are a US citizen, we don't have any reason to question that they are not a, so even though they come up maybe on the declared non-citizen, if they've checked the box that yes, I'm a citizen, then we process it.
Under penalty of perjury.
Yeah. That makes sense?
And we have the usual small number of cases where people perhaps casting an unauthorized vote, including several people who tried to vote a second time. In most of the cases, we think it was inadvertent. We did refer two voters to the Commonwealth Attorney, one a potential, I think, a non-citizen, and one person who voted early voting and then 3 days later voted at the election. And obviously, I recognize, as you have said, all of those matters are confidential, but it's certainly my hope that, I mean, these sort of events are certainly uncommon, but it would be nice if we could find one of those uncommon events, make a public issue of it, prosecute that person, and then that would be a good warning to others in the future. And I think you mentioned that we also perhaps have a matter involving a voter who voted here and then voted provisionally in Bethesda and
Bethesda, no, Montgomery,
Montgomery County.
no, sorry,
The one here,
Virginia Tech University.
that,
That one.
our Montgomery County, not the one across the river.
Yeah, Virginia Tech, a student. Yeah, a student, not, yeah.
Yeah,
Would
but
that have come up when the state did its report?
I was contacted by the registrar in Montgomery County when she was processing her same day registrations, so. They are aware that the individual had voting credit in Arlington.
for everyone's information, that does not get referred across the street here, that because the second vote happened in Montgomery County, it goes to their,
There's, yeah.
they have to refer it to their Commonwealth Attorney, not
Yeah.
ours.
So all of the relevant information is provided. So. And to that note, I did meet with the Commonwealth Attorney's office after the election and provided them information on all of the incidents. Okay. That is all I have for the post-election reporting.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr.
Excellent report.
The one thing, ranked choice voting was not. I know I've not heard feedback from the county survey about ranked choice voting, but my feedback about how ranked choice voting went in Arlington, I would say that it was largely unremarkable and that it was just something we were doing at this point in time. So it was not the event. Yeah.
And it didn't go through to the tabulations.
Didn't go through to, it was pretty close, especially when you look at under and over votes. It was only, I want to say around 300 votes away from needing a second tabulation, which I think probably is a lot closer than most people realize. Because they don't, the public websites don't show undervotes, but those have to be factored in.
Which is
for
why,
voting
despite the
around.
results that got reported on election night in terms of first preferences, and it looked like JD was much further ahead, we were not saying anything until very late in the game when all of the rest of the, like,
Right.
Yeah,
provisionals and
We had to
everything
make
else.
sure
came.
And we still had 5,000 outstanding votes, and when you're 100 votes away, it's,
Yes,
yeah.
because when you, and Gretchen could correct me if I'm wrong, but I did not know this until we had a conversation during this process, was it's effectively, because of the way tabulation can occur, if you leave a blank in your first column and then rank in 2 and 3, it'll count as an undervote in that initial sort of count.
Yeah.
But in the actual tabulation, that person has votes, their second choice bumps up. So you can't say that that is, an undervote there doesn't mean that that is an invalid ballot and it will just disappear. So you have to count that.
We don't
as
know
part
if
of the-
that's
The denominator when determining.
a blank office or,
Right.
yeah.
So that so in a sense, what we report on election night is round zero, not round one.
It is round zero, not round one, but.
When you're saying undervote in this case, it's they didn't choose a first candidate.
They didn't choose a first choice, or maybe they made too many selections and vote in the one. Or, yeah, so it can either be, we don't know if they just skipped the office or did they just skip that ranking? Does that make sense? So the numbers and it's not uncommon for voters, especially in a presidential election, for voters to not vote for things further down the ballot. They go in, they just vote for president, that's all they want to vote for. And like I said, we don't know how those ballots are marked. So we don't know what's an undervote versus, like, they didn't vote for the office or they didn't vote for that.
Which is why in determining if JD had over 50% of the vote, you have to include those undervotes, because if he goes below, then you do an actual tabulation. The system will look at those undervotes.
And
And determine
reallocate any ballot.
Are any of them actual valid votes in the second and third column?
Yeah.
And pull those votes back into the pile of votes.
And that's what was happening with Maine, or with one of their races. It was just really close because they aren't reporting the undervotes publicly. So it looked much closer than what it looked like election night, or was much closer than it was election night. I think it was Maine.
There are only
Two states that use it statewide
state.
for federal offices.
I don't think we were hearing news about Portland.
All right, is that to it?
That is it.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the audit wrap up. We had an audit, one of the races soon after the election. Did you want to report on that?
Yeah, so after every election in Virginia, a post-election audit is conducted. The state conducted a full post-election audit on the Senate race using a ballot polling method. This is a risk limiting audit method. I forget how many ballots we pulled. 50?
It's 6 tables.
Yeah.
Most of them had 10, one of them had 9.
55.
55, thank you, Kim. So Arlington was selected to pull 55 ballots. We were told which ballots to pull, so we had to go through our batches of ballots, whether it was from early voting, mail, or election day, and pull the 55 ballots that we were randomly chosen to be pulled. That audit did pass in the first round. We did this, every locality in the state had a set number of ballots to pull. We were not randomly chosen for the other audit. There was an audit conducted on a House of Representatives district down in the Tidewater region. They used a different method.
Is
That
it the
one
first or the
Took
fifth?
2 days for that one.
Sorry,
Is it the first district or the fifth?
it's James City County, wherever James City County. in
I'm
New
not
York.
that good yet.
So, and that used a different method.
It took them 2 days to complete that audit.
So, but things went very smoothly, I think, from our perspective, from the electoral board's perspective, things went short of, it's like the struggle with the presidential election every year is the
I think
sheer
yet again, we were
number of
done by you.
ballots. Yeah, we were done in a couple of.
Yeah.
Having now done both. This was a ballot polling method this year. Last November 2023, we did
Batch
the batch comparison audit. They both took about the same amount of time total. It's distributed differently. So with the batch comparison, it's really easy to pull the batch. And most of the time is spent with the counting. Whereas with the ballot polling method, you're spending a lot more time finding the ballots that you need to count and a lot less time actually registering in the system what those ballots say.
Yeah.
Because you're doing a lot of counting, except you're counting to find, because the way they pick is like, they're like, okay, this batch has 500 ballots in it. You need to count down to the 213th and pull that ballot. So you're sitting there going, okay, this is
Yeah,
this is 500 ballots. You're measuring the stack. You're like, okay, we'll start here.
okay. Yeah, things went well. So, and the winner of the Senate race was found to be the winner of the Senate race with an overwhelming confidence based on the statistical sampling of ballots that were audited.
Because we share a court, the city of Falls Church also was here to do their audit. They pulled 3 ballots. Is that what they? 3 ballots.
Three.
3 ballots. They were done in about 15 minutes. Just left.
They said goodbye to us and then.
Goodbye, we're out.
All right, the next item on the agenda is consideration of a strategic plan for electoral board office.
Okay,
And this is Dominic's.
yeah, it's my point. So I'll start. If anybody has looked on our website, we still have up the original strategic plan. I will give credit to Gretchen, who's mentioned it twice to me, at least, that the elections office was the first department of county government to have a strategic plan.
It's not true.
Okay. But you said it was the first.
Well, I think we might be one of the only elections office in the country to have.
No, the first in the county.
No, lots of
said.
departments have strategic.
No, but you were the first to have one. Didn't you say that twice to me?
Of an elections office?
No, not of an elections office, but the first Arlington County department to develop a strategic plan.
No, definitely not. Sorry.
Whatever you said sounded like you were bragging about having it first.
We had one a few years before some other departments that were much larger than we
That
are.
should have had. one.
That's neither here. nor
Yeah,
there.
so for anybody who's looked, the strategic plan was adopted now going on 7 years ago. We have had a pandemic and a lot of election law changes. Some of the stuff that's in here was talking about growth of the county and how many precincts we think we're gonna have to add and changes and stuff like that, that is just totally not relevant anymore because with the rise of early voting and mail voting, we are probably not gonna have to add those precincts because we don't have enough people showing up on election day to really force it. We might, but we might not. We will, which is an item on the agenda, be replacing our elections equipment. So this seemed like a good time, having gone through a whole cycle of elections with new laws and having just finished a presidential, for us to start on the process of creating Arlington Electoral Board Strategic Plan 2.1. I have no preconceived notion of what that process looks like. My goal for putting it on the agenda was just to get the ball rolling and to sort of brainstorm how we want to go about this and maybe what sort of timeline we might want to look at.
So I think for this, we definitely, I don't think we need. I think this is
Not yet.
part of our, yeah, because I think maybe a vote on the final report, but in terms of putting this together, I don't think we need to have a vote on this. But I think, I mean, it's 3 of us, right? It sounds kind of weird to be like, let's put together a committee of the 3 of us and Gretchen and Alyssa and go through this and see what updates and changes we need to make to this. But I think we should try to plan to meet in some way for the purpose of, and just have the meeting set specifically for this. So if that is forming a committee, so that it's not officially a meeting we have to keep calling to order.
No, anytime to discuss.
Anytime we're in the same room together.
I know,
it's a
because there's only
meeting,
3
we
of
have to
us,
notice
yeah.
it. But we can call it in the same way that I assume they call working sessions of the
Yeah.
county board we'll call it specifically for this purpose and limit ourselves to this purpose. So those people that don't want to drag themselves out here to watch us talk about the strategic plan. Part of what I was also contemplating was talk about timeline. To what extent do we, if at all, sorry guys, want to entertain any public input in terms of suggestions, maybe for things we might consider. I don't know that we want necessarily public comment on the plan because it's but
Well, if we have a work session meeting, I would have no objection to having people here and they can make their comments for any suggestions they might have then. I suspect we probably would get 0 comments. The one set of comments I'd like to get now would be from you. I'm certainly not against taking a look at this and seeing if it does need updating. I'm not necessarily sure that 7 years is a huge change of time. What do you see that has changed in those years that you think might be a fruitful basis for doing this and making changes?
So it's so how the original strategic plan came about was largely something I did as a deputy for the office. And the reason for doing that is I really want to highlight some of the challenges. Well, strategic plans are really good when you're going in to communicate into meetings with the county board or the county manager to talk about here's how our community is growing and the challenges we're facing as an office. And it's really about helping get the funding that we need and are we growing in the right ways. So that's where that is the background of the strategic plan was I really needed of the county board and the county manager's office to understand that some of the challenges our office was facing. In terms of, we have been successful in many of the desired outcomes, obviously goals shift with the pandemic and things like that. But many of the desired our goals from the strategic plan, they have been achieved by now. So the question, I do think we need to reassess, since we do have new laws in place, whether we need to continue adding polling places at the rate that was suggested in here, or if there are other things that, yeah, so it's never a bad idea to reassess where we are. So.
I did mention that that was another sort of item. 2 other items was none of us were on the board in 2018 when it was
No.
first adopted. So
I
it's
don't even know that
yeah.
the board adopted it.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
none of us were involved in that process. And if you look at the goals and some of the sort of things that were set out, the timeframes are all now in the past.
Yeah, they are.
I think if we really review this, we'll find many of them were achieved and or were made moot by the pandemic and other things that sort of put those things on hold or
Yeah,
made
and
them
then also the new
unnecessary.
laws as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
We are now even in some respects past the beyond the next 4
We
years.
are, we really are.
Of this plan.
So what other strategic plans in the county, have, so I know the fire department just went through creating their strategic plan and they did like working group sessions with community members and the public to help them, to help define what the fire department's, plan should be. They also hired a consultant. We did not hire a consultant for any of this. So,
I do not think we need a consultant.
I was just gonna say, I've gone through this process before on another board that I was on, and actually it was really helpful to have this third party.
yes,
And also just the way this particular consulting firm did it, the goal was to have a 2-page strategic plan.
yeah,
Like some boxes and graphs like this. And it actually turned out for the communication purposes, as you mentioned, it was very helpful for all the board members and. So I'd be happy to share that model, but that worked out pretty well.
yeah.
Um,
So, but those are the questions we need to ask ourselves is what are the challenges that we see for the next 4 years? Are they the same challenges? Obviously, as Arlington continues to develop, that's going to be, yeah, as we add, although our growth has stagnated since the pandemic. We aren't growing at the same rate that we were projected to be growing in 2018.
some folks got that remote work opportunity and fled for
Yep.
more rural climes. Would my colleagues be amenable to the idea that we will schedule a working session of some sort to start this process and we can decide the rest of the process after that, from that point?
I agree with Kim. I don't think there's any reason to have any sort of vote on it now, other than that we all make a commitment to do what I haven't done yet, which is to you just carefully
It's very short.
study
Very short.
potential.
Don't point out my typos from 17.
All right, any more on the strategic plan? All right, the next item is,
I will just note that, as we said in the course of that discussion, because the three of us will be in a room and be talking about public business, it will be noticed as a meeting. It'll be noticed as a public meeting, the same as these are, but it will not be along our regular schedule. We'll figure out when that will be.
all right, the next item is a discussion of voting equipment replacement.
Yes, so the county board has asked that we have voting equipment that allows us to rank at a minimum of 5 candidates for ranked choice voting. Our current equipment has a ranking limitation of 3, which is why you can only rank up to 3 candidates. So we were always going to start the process of voting machine replacement. It's always been a part of the CIP to replace voting equipment along this timeline. The capital improvement plan to replace voting equipment this year or next year. And so we will be moving forward with either an upgrade or a replacement of our current voting equipment. Tonight, I just want to provide a quick overview of just to make the public aware of some of the limitations around voting equipment purchases in Virginia, because I think a lot of people think I can just go to Best Buy and buy stuff, and that's not the case when it comes to voting equipment. So voting equipment in Virginia has to be duly certified at both the federal and the state level. So all voting equipment must be certified to the Election Assistance Commission's voluntary voting system guidelines. And then they have to be certified again at the state level to make sure that the voting equipment is in compliance with Virginia's laws for conducting an election. And then Arlington now has an extra requirement put on place, and that we need it to do ranked choice voting, ranking at least up to 5 individuals. So there are currently 5 vendors that are certified for use in Virginia. Within those vendors, some have multiple systems available for certification or available for purchase. And yeah, so but our shopping mall, if you will, has 5 stores in it, most of them with 1 item in it. A voting system is an entire system. It is not just one piece of equipment. So voting system is the software that designs the ballot. It's the software and the hardware where you're scanning your paper ballot. It has an ADA touchscreen or handheld device component, and all the hardware and software for that. And then there's a tabulation software component as well. And then we also have a high-speed scanner that we use here in Arlington for mail ballots. So it's several different pieces of hardware and software, and all of those pieces make a voting system. You cannot buy a scanner, a precinct scanner from one vendor and use a high-speed scanner from a different vendor. For the most part, there's one configuration where that would work. But for the most part, when you're going with the vendor, you're buying a full system from them that includes all of these different pieces. It should last around 10 years, although that's not always the case. And we haven't.
How long have we had our current?
2015. So it
Pretty
is
much 10
a
years.
year right now. So it has reached the lifespan that I wanted to get out of it back in 2015. And then we have the added complication in that I mentioned the federal regulations, the voluntary voting system guidelines. There is a newer version. It was on 1.2. All systems are certified to that standard. There is a 2.0 version of these standards. There are currently no systems in the country certified to 2.0, but there are 3 systems currently in the process of being certified to 2.0. And there's always the risk that the state will make it a requirement that all voting systems used in Virginia be certified to 2.0, which anything we purchase now may or may not be compliant if the state decides to put in that regulation further down. They've already talked about doing it. So this isn't just something that I'm being paranoid about, because the state can decertify equipment whenever they want. And so as a community that's going into a multi-million-dollar purchase, we want to make sure that we're being prudent with whatever this purchase or lease and what their transition plan is to make sure that we are good for the next 10 years. So there are a lot of,
You don't want to get a year into this system and have it not qualify under the 2.0 rules and the state say, you need a 2.0 certified system, and we have to go hat in hand to the county board again and say, we're gonna need another $3 million to go replace this again.
yeah, and the system we just purchased is worthless because it's no longer compliant with the decertification.
We can't then go and sell it to some other county and
Yeah.
be like, here, you take it.
For the three that you mentioned are in the approval process, do you know the expected timeline of when they'll either get the green check?
That's definitely a question for the federal government, for the EAC. I don't think anyone knows, and I don't know how much experience people have with some of these things. Is a vendor might tell you one thing, the person who's doing the checks and actually running the test will tell you something very different. So I'm not privy to that information. I do know that like even after they get 2.0, they now have to send that system through state certification as well. So it is a long process to be certified. It can take up to 6 months. So
Now, in terms of ranked choice voting, my understanding is that there are vendors who have systems that will allow people to vote for 5 candidates
Yes.
rather than just 3
Yes.
currently.
and that include, I believe that includes even an upgraded version of our current system. So that's why I say it's an upgrade or a replacement. So we have the option of either upgrading with our current vendor or replacing and going with a different vendor.
Now, I've never totally understood the way our computers work, but I gather that when we get all of the first place votes counted, we then put it on a thumb drive. We put it into a different computer.
Yes, correct.
Would the new system allow that all to be done in one?
There are our current system would allow us to do it all in one location. The state regulations require us to use that different software for tabulation.
Would that still be the case?
As
Okay.
long as the state regulation that we all use this other software is
Okay, so the regulation is that that is the RCV tabulation software that we must. Not a question of these other vendors could get their stuff. I mean, they theoretically could, but for now, that rule is, there is one approved method of doing an RCV tabulation.
Yeah, but what some vendors are doing is they're building in RC tab into their current solutions, like, so it gets really complicated real
So in
quick.
theory, if one of the things that we selected had it built in, we could theoretically get the state to
Maybe.
say, you don't need a,
Maybe.
we theoretically could get the state to maybe say. How's that?
It's,
Opens up a possibility that may or may not be.
there are options available, so.
It opens up what looks like a tunnel, but it may in fact be that the road owner painted a hole in a brick wall and we just.
Yeah, so if there is a movement to expand ranked choice voting beyond just a countywide office, then you would need to tabulate across each of these voting systems, and only, once again, vendors, it's proprietary. It's like Apple, Windows, they don't, back in the 90s when they didn't talk to each other. So this RC tab has the ability to read all of the vendors because it's not a proprietary product. Anyway, it gets, like I said, it gets complicated real quick. We'll just, I'm happy to answer any questions people might have.
I think
But I don't.
there's a question I think I suspect I already know the answer to, but perhaps the public doesn't. What is our theoretical timeline?
I do think it's not possible before the primary. We'll still see how long it takes vendors to get machines of production for the general. But just there isn't a ton of time between now and when we start voting again on May 3rd to have a new system in place, although we have put a new system in place in 3 weeks, so.
But our theoretical hope is that we could have something for November.
Something for November. And my hope is that, like I said, I'm working through getting the approved list of all of the vendors and the systems that are approved for use in Virginia now. I'll go out and get their ranked choice voting, what they can do with ranked choice voting. The other thing I'm really interested in seeing is what that touch screen looks for ranked choice voting, because some of those ballot marking errors might be able to be reduced if we start pushing people to vote on a touchscreen where it prints out a ballot, rather than just having them hand mark a paper ballot.
What are the chances that some or all of those systems will be hanging around in the exhibition hall at, say, the Viva meeting?
There's, my hope was that if all of the electoral board were going to be at the Viva meeting.
I am planning.
Is that we work to schedule meetings with the vendors there. It's extremely costly for the vendors to do on-site visits, so let's take advantage.
If we're all on the same
Yeah.
site already, we might.
They have to ship.
It's like the last Sunday, Monday, Tuesday of,
The
Yeah, I
23rd,
can get them.
24th. So
Yeah.
23rd is food.
so the Sunday would be boot camp, which you don't have to go to, Rich. March. I have to go. Even though I went
For
last.
the training. Yeah,
Yes,
so the hope is that at least with the electoral boards, we can meet with each of the vendors, go ahead and pre-schedule meetings. And really get to ask the questions that you guys have about the equipment there. Because each one is a little different, so.
I know we talked to some of the folks last year at the.
It's different when
it
you're
was-
purchasing.
Yeah,
like
it was still a
something you're like-
theoretical, we're gonna be purchasing next year
Yeah.
but not really,
And the problem is
Absolutely,
vendor, a lot of times vendors will show you something that you can't like it's not,
right?
that's not certified for use in Virginia. And hopes it'll be
But if
certified.
we're arranging meetings, they will theoretically be bringing things that they can actually sell us.
Yeah, or they can at least be prepared for those conversations.
Just a quick question about the ranked choice. All, to your knowledge, Gretchen, these machines with ranked choice voting, that still require that all the media sticks be taken and then centralized?
Yeah, so once again, there's the different sides of the software that the vendors have. One is where they lay out and design the ballot, and then there's the other component, which is tabulation. And so the state has said that for ranked choice voting tabulation, we have to use RC Tab, which is a different software. And the only way to get data from one system to their system is to thumb drives, roll it up to that system. So,
But you still need to do that, even
Yeah.
if they have their own software.
Yeah.
in the machine.
yeah, you still have to load the data. I mean, how else do you get data from the voting, from each precinct scanners into for a central
Right.
tabulation?
Because also the note is, because you cannot do this digitally. Like the machines by requirement, that part of the certification is, they can't have things that will allow them to connect to the internet. So we would not be able to just beam it across to, like the scanner it's a computer in a sense, but it's dead. It cannot connect to anything else except through that. Just like your old computer with your 3.5-inch floppy disk. That was the only way to transfer something from one computer to the other, was put it on a disk, take the disk and put it in the other computer. It's the same sort of system.
It's
To clarify for voting equipment, put upgrade current equipment. If you want to replace, it sounds like we would need to wait for a while until 3 systems which are now in process.
Only-
Like 2.0.
Yeah, only one of those is certified. Only one of those companies currently in 2.0 certification is used in Virginia right now. There's 2 that have never been used in Virginia and have never sought to be certified in Virginia. So,
And those 2 are still going through the US certification?
yeah, they're going through the federal government certification.
If you wanted to see those.
I mean, the vendors will show you whatever you want to look at right now, but once again, can you buy an uncertified, like, we can't buy an uncertified system.
And since these vendors, they'd have to basically be making a commitment before we're gonna waste their time and our time. They'd have to say like, oh, if we get certified at 2.0 from the EAC, like.
Yeah, what's
We
the,
are going to, we will submit to Virginia, even though we've never done that before, because it's to our advantage. But if they're not gonna play in the Virginia market, makes no sense for.
yeah, and thank you, Tanya, and I am trying to get from the state, like, if anybody is in process, so, yeah. But every state has different certification programs because every state's laws are obviously different for voting. And so sometimes Virginia requirements and other state like that we have to, just because it passes the federal level, doesn't mean that it can actually run an election according to the laws of Virginia.
I will note something, Chris, just to, the upgrade of our current system is still subject to all the state limitations. It is not certified at 2.0, like, it would have the same.
It is not, it just allows for 5 rankings, but it has been certified for use.
So even if we were
Actually-
just to upgrade, we'd still potentially run into the problem of the state basically obsoletes our equipment way too soon. And we'd have to do something. So even that option is not like, oh, that's a stopgap. We can do that, we'd be safe.
Yeah,
We may not be. So it's a lot to consider, but
sorry, that was a very detailed conversation.
it's good for everyone to know. This has been in the background for most of last year, but
Yeah.
because of the presidential election, we weren't really talking about it. We were like,
And we have one more question from John.
You required to have 3 bids?
No, because there is a code section 24.2 that says that purchases of voting equipment, ballots, and certain things are exempt from the other procurement requirements. So does that mean that we don't, so when, I mean, we try to get 3 bids when, because that is prudent to do. But because it is such a narrow marketplace, there might only be one vendor that meets the requirements that we have between federal, state, and Arlington standards. So,
I think, FYI for the public, Gretchen's practice has been to adhere to the procurement rules whenever that is possible,
yes.
even though she is not required to do so.
Yeah, but it doesn't require a formal request for bid, for request for proposal, or anything like that. Because once again, the options are very limited. So, yeah.
All right, if that's it for voting equipment, the next item is the discussion of 2025 election officer approvals.
So for this, Alyssa's going to come off mute. She is joining us virtually today.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep,
Yep.
we can hear you.
Okay, great. So as required by state law, the Board of Elections needs to renew the terms of election officers on the list when their term comes to an end. This county uses a 1-year term for all their election officers, so that time will come with the next meeting, which is required by law to be the first week of next month. So I just wanted to share my plans for how I will formulate the list for 2025 and, get the board's feedback and approval. The list usually vacillates between 3,000 and 2,000 people on it. So we're not really worried too much about having enough people on this list. So my list maintenance activities will mostly be about removing people who are no longer eligible or interested in being an election officer. So I have 3 intended plans. The first is to send out a survey to all of the officers on the list, asking them to confirm their address, their party, and that they are in fact still interested in being an election officer. And from that survey, we will remove anybody who says that they're not interested in serving anymore. Also, we have the ability to audit our list against the voter registration database, as all election officers must be registered in the state of Virginia. Anybody on that list who is no longer registered in Virginia, I'll just remove them, as well as anybody who like lives in Roanoke now, too far away to be a reasonable expectation to drive here. And the last is removing people who have either already told me through a different means that they're no longer interested in working election day, or who regularly does a different task for us on election days with our office, as well as any officers who have demonstrated through their actions that they are not able to follow the election officer code of conduct that was set out for them in training. Not a whole lot, but a few. So those are my plans for cleaning the list before I present it next month. Just want to confirm that that's in line with what the board would like.
I am fine with that. I would ask one supplement. Could you, to the extent anybody is going to be left off the list for the last of your reasons, which is the officer code of conduct kind of thing, could you push them off into a separate list so that we could perhaps take a look at them in executive session, and just so we know who got yanked for being
Yeah,
naughty?
absolutely. I can do that. It's not going to be a long one, but I can
That's why
certainly take that
I'm not,
on.
that's why I asked, is because I was not expecting it to be a list of 300 people. I was figuring
Oh,
it
yeah.
might not even make one full column of a page, so.
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that.
I have had a couple of questions recently from people asking how much are we planning to pay officers in the coming year? Do you have that worked out yet?
I know that we have raised the wages for election officers with this budget year. Gretchen can certainly correct me if I am wrong, because this is a budgetary thing. But it is my understanding that we will continue to pay them at the increased rate that we started paying them in the fall.
Yeah, raised the rates for the fiscal year, so they already got their increase in the fall.
At one point it was 185, but I think it's more than that now. Is it?
I am trying to figure out.
I know it's in the beginning of an election day guide for the election officers. It's also on my computer, but I don't have it here.
No, it's
Election officers are currently paid 200, and I believe it's
Is there a plan, Gretchen, to
on the
pitch
website.
another increase to the county board?
So we did not include an increase in this budget year. That budget has already been submitted, but once again, this might be one of those things to what Alyssa did when she was with Alexandria. She actually had the Alexandria City Council suggest like an increase over several years to help bring them up. So this might be one of those areas to consider for the strategic plan. So.
A question about for Alyssa's survey. Did you mention, Alyssa, that would include asking them about their party affiliation? If they would like to be affiliated?
yes.
I believe, if Alyssa, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the process we were theoretically going to follow for this was you said you will confirm I think we should confirm the people who are already affiliated. The question about prospective affiliation was supposed to be included when we send out basically their paperwork after the next meeting saying, we have reappointed you, do you accept your appointment? And that there is a survey that goes along with that to indicate availability, and that the question for affiliation would be there. Or are you gonna ask it now? And I mean, I don't think I care one way or the other, but.
So my intention was, because I would rather send out one survey than two. So my intention was to send out one survey that asks everyone if they're still interested in serving as an election officer for 2025, and what if they would like to affiliate with a party. And that question is essentially the same question exactly that we asked them before the fall election. So the same back end of approval from the parties. Anybody who is already approved by their party nothing happens. But if there's a new affiliation, that's when the approval automation kicks off. I can certainly split that into 2 surveys. That would
No,
just
I
be
just wanted
2.
to, like, that way the survey, there's not a survey after our appointments. There's just a notification that gets sent out that says you've been appointed. Please click here to accept your appointment. Okay, that's fine. Just one item, just for purposes of the party folks that are here. You will not see names of people who are already on your lists come back to you. Am I correct, Alyssa? So if somebody is a Republican or a Democrat, you're not going to get a request to reapprove them. If at any point somebody that is on the list needs to be removed, you should tell us they need to be removed. Will we be able to tell them if anybody proactively resubmits that form and says, I would like to be removed from my affiliation for whatever reason? I know some people go work for the government and the government agency says, we would really not like you to do that.
I don't have my code book with me. I don't have a home code book and a office code book. But I believe that the code says
Come
that,
on.
I know, I'm really, but I believe that the code says that the parties, and in fact, anyone is entitled to review a list of officers that has their party affiliation and their precinct, their home precinct on it.
I think at least the party chairs are entitled to.
Yeah, the party chairs are.
If not the.
Certainly, yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
So
Thank
we
you.
would be able to produce that list.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And
So then theoretically, Frank and Steve and other John, you could, I guess, start to see some things come through the pre-existing system shortly, one might say. So, well, presumably it'll go out soon because we have to meet again in about 3 weeks to do that.
I have a meeting with the database contractor later this week to design the survey. So it'll go out as soon as possible.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Anything more, Melissa, on subject? All right, so the final item on the agenda is setting 2025 meeting dates. Our general schedule has been 6 p.m. on the second Tuesday of the month.
I would propose we keep that schedule, except that, as Alyssa just reminded us, for February, would anybody be opposed to the first Tuesday of the month, since we have to meet in the first week of February according to code,
It's February 4th.
rather than the 11th?
I'm fine. I'm fine with that. And I also know that there are going to be some other instances later in the year where we move meetings because of
Elections, yeah.
But our general starting point will be the second Tuesday of the month, except for February.
And in terms of February,
I would move that we.
tentatively say that, and I will get back after I check with my boss.
So we're saying tentatively. 6 p.m.
I move that we set our general meeting schedule to be the second Tuesday of the month at 6 p.m., except for February, where it will be the first Tuesday of the month. Tentatively the first.
I second that motion.
And just for discussion purposes, and I just want to add on there and for any other times we have meetings as well for other days.
Yes. All right, all in favor of that schedule, say aye.
Aye.
All right, that's approved. 7:17, any other items anybody wants?
Marathon session here at the 11th.
If not,
I move we adjourn.
I second that motion. Hearing no objection, it's 7:18 and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.